The Trump Organization has been indicted by New York State prosecutors for what the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has called a sweeping and audacious illegal payment scheme, according to the New York Times. Here are the details. On Thursday, New York prosecutors released a 15-count indictment sheet charging the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, with the crime of scheme to defraud in the first degree. The New York Times summarized that Weisselberg is accused of concealing $1.7 million of taxable income by not declaring fringe benefits. The largest of these benefits listed in the court document is an apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Prosecutors from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the New York Attorney General allege that the Trump Organization paid rent and related expenses of $1.17 million on an apartment without declaring it as income to tax authorities. In addition, the document alleges the company paid $196,245 towards lease payments on Mercedes Benz cars for Weisselberg and his wife, plus $359,058 in tuition fees for Weisselberg family members and ad hoc personal expenses to Weisselberg, going towards new beds, flat-screen televisions, carpet installation, and furniture for Weisselberg's home in Florida. In total, it is alleged that Weisselberg evaded $556,385 in federal taxes, $106,568 in state taxes, and $238,159 in New York City taxes through the same scheme. He also claimed $94,902 in federal tax refunds and $38,222 in state tax refunds to which he wasn't entitled. He has pleaded not guilty. According to Vox, there is somewhat of an ulterior motive behind these charges. Weisselberg has worked for the Trump family since the 1970s and, according to one Trump biographer, knows where all the financial bodies are buried. With this in mind, prosecutors have been trying for months to flip Weisselberg so he can operate as a cooperating witness against the Trump Organization. These charges are recognition that they have so far not succeeded in doing so. However, the broader agenda appears relatively transparent. These are the first charges brought as part of Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr.'s wider investigation into the former president's company, which is also looking into hush money allegedly paid to women who had sexual relations with Trump and claims of real estate price manipulation. If Weisselberg were to act as a witness against Trump, any possible tax, insurance, or bank fraud case against the former president would likely be easier to make, according to Vox. Why does this matter? Firstly, for the Trump Organization, it could mean further financial difficulties. The Trump Organization already has about $900 million of debt due to be repaid over the next 4 years, according to the Financial Times, about a third of which is personally guaranteed by Trump. However, the bigger picture is that any charges against himself or his company make it more difficult for Trump to win if he runs for president in 2024. Trump has already begun a series of campaign-style political rallies and may be positioning himself for another run at the presidency, according to The Guardian. Vox explains that many of Trump's opponents could see these legal battles as a way of putting obstacles between Trump and that run. The Trump Organization certainly feels this lies behind Wednesday's indictment, saying in a press statement reprinted by CNN, "This is not justice, this is politics." Trump's lawyer echoed these sentiments, calling it a sad day for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. After years of investigation and the collection of millions of documents and devoting the resources of dozens of prosecutors and outside consultants, this is all they have, he said. The New York Times thinks he may have a point. It is highly unusual for prosecutors to indict a company for failing to pay payroll taxes on fringe benefits alone, it said. Alongside this, it has also been widely observed that the two people in charge of the investigation, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance and New York State Attorney General Letitia James, are both Democrats. Speaking to the New York Times, Trump himself called the accusations against his company a continuation of the witch hunt that started when I came down the escalator, referring to his 2015 announcement that he would run for president for the first time. Does anyone else feel like American politics is stuck on replay? The storming of the U.S. Capitol by a pro-Trump mob on Wednesday, January 6th, has prompted calls to remove him from office before his term ends on January 20th. This is how that could happen. Either the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution or a second impeachment could be used to remove Trump from office. To trigger the 25th Amendment, Vice President Mike Pence and 8 of the 15 principal cabinet members would have to notify Congress that Trump was unfit to perform the duties of the president. Pence would then become acting president for the remainder of Trump's term. The 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967 after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It addresses presidential succession and disability. Trump could argue that he is capable of resuming the job. If Pence and a majority of cabinet members do not dispute Trump's declaration, Trump would regain power. If they contest Trump's declaration, Congress would decide the outcome and Pence would remain acting president until Congress does so. A two-thirds majority of both houses of Congress would be required to keep Trump from returning to power, but since Democrats control the House of Representatives, they could simply delay voting on the dispute until Trump's term has ended. Trump could also be impeached and removed. Impeachment is not removal of the president from office. Impeachment is similar to indictment in a criminal case. To impeach Trump, the House of Representatives would bring charges that the president engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors. If a simple majority of the House's 435 members approve bringing charges, known as articles of impeachment, the process moves to the Senate. The Senate would then hold a trial to determine the president's guilt. If Trump is found guilty by a two-thirds majority, Pence would become president. But what high crimes and misdemeanors could Trump be accused of? Frank Bowman, a professor of constitutional law at the University of Missouri, told Reuters Trump could be impeached for fomenting sedition or an attempt to overthrow the U.S. government. Bowman said Trump could also be impeached for disloyalty to the U.S. Constitution and failing to uphold his oath of office. Donald Trump faces an impeachment trial for incitement of insurrection in a speech to supporters before the deadly attack on the Capitol. Trump is the first U.S. president to have been impeached twice and will become the first to face trial in the Senate after his term in office. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts presided over Trump's first impeachment trial. But as Trump is no longer president, Roberts is not constitutionally obliged to preside over this trial. The Democrats could have chosen Vice President Kamala Harris to preside, but instead chose the Senate's longest-serving member and President pro tempore, Patrick Leahy of Vermont. There are 50 Republicans in the Senate and 48 Democrats, along with 2 senators who caucus with the Democrats. 6 Republicans are expected to side with the Democrats in finding Trump guilty. However, a two-thirds majority of senators present is required to convict Trump. That means an additional 11 Republicans would have to side with the Democrats if all senators are present. Trump's impeachment trial has 3 possible outcomes. First, the Democrats fail to muster a two-thirds majority and Trump is acquitted. Second, Trump is convicted. Third, Trump is convicted and lawmakers declare that he engaged in insurrection or rebellion under the 14th Amendment. Trump could then be banned from ever holding public office again by a majority vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The origins of COVID-19 are still a hotly contested subject, and that might always be the case, because definitive proof of where exactly a virus originates is hard to establish. But this issue is also about more than just an abstract scientific study. At this point, deciding where exactly COVID-19 came from and how it came about is as much about attributing blame as anything else. And let's just say Republicans have made their feelings on the issue clear in a new report. Here's what you need to know. Republicans on the U.S. House Intelligence Committee say significant circumstantial evidence exists that the coronavirus pandemic originated from a leak at China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, according to the Times of London. The report, which contradicts WHO conclusions following its investigative mission in Wuhan, claims the lab in Wuhan had been conducting what it calls dangerous research on coronaviruses and had not followed necessary safety protocols, risking an outbreak. The report goes on to add that researchers in the lab were struck with COVID-19-like symptoms in late 2019. Addressing the idea that COVID-19 occurred naturally by jumping from another species to humans, the report says little circumstantial evidence has emerged. This view is corroborated by Alina Chan, molecular biologist at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, who told Politico none of the hundreds of animal samples collected from the Huanan seafood market widely linked to the outbreak had any trace of the virus. The report's findings are, however, contested by Robert Gary, virologist at the Tulane School of Medicine in New Orleans, who pointed out to Politico that the majority of early cases in humans were linked to different markets that sold wildlife or wildlife products in Wuhan. Joel Wertheim, evolutionary biologist at the University of California, San Diego, also countered the lab argument, noting that lab-manipulated viruses are usually made up of pieces from other known viruses, whereas SARS-CoV-2 does not closely resemble any previously characterized virus. The most probable origin scenario remains a natural zoonosis from bats or an intermediate animal host, he added. For its part, the World Health Organization has also come out very clearly against the lab argument, stating that while accidents at labs are possible, there had been no publication or research of this virus or one close to this virus anywhere in the world prior to the 2019 outbreak, and that does sound quite definitive. However, various elements of this debate are ongoing, even among those whose opinions carry most weight. For instance, David A. Relman, a microbiologist at Stanford University, told Politico lab accidents are much more common than any of us know or would like to admit, and they occur worldwide and even in the most safe and secure labs. Meanwhile, Christian Anderson, virologist at the Scripps Research Institute in San Diego, was clear that this particular kind of lab leak would be unheard of. There are no examples of lab escapes of novel, previously unknown viruses having led to outbreaks, let alone pandemics, he said. Famous examples of SARS, H1N1, and Ebola were all caused by known viruses, which have already been selected for their ability to infect humans. The same is not true for a virus randomly sampled by a researcher from a bat. So what can we, the watching public, conclude from this new Republican report? Probably very little. Expert opinion favors the idea that the virus transferred from another species to humans, likely via a Wuhan wet market. However, there are enough qualified people saying that a lab leak is theoretically possible to make that theory at least worth thinking about. One conclusion that could be on offer here and now, though, is that if there is a legitimate discussion to be had, maybe it's best not led by politicians, because we need more light, not more heat, on this particular origin story. And that's very, very unlikely to be generated by a report released by obviously partisan politicians engaged in geopolitical mind games. You know?
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.